Hello, all. Just popping in here to say that the Latino Worldviews study we discuss in this episode was just written up in the New York Times in a piece titled Democrats Try to Move Past Cultural Pandering to Latinos. So head over there and check it out. Okay, enjoy the show. Hello, friends, and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I am joined by
Jenifer Fernandez Ancona, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Way to Win.
Okay, and I forgot to let Gretchen know that I'm going to introduce her, but we'll hear from her in just a second. Today, we've got some really juicy research to dig into on Latinos with the lead researcher who conducted the study for us, Gretchen Barton, founder of Worthy Strategy Group. Gretchen specializes in digging below the surface to get to the heart of what's really going on for people and what actually moves them. Welcome to the pod, Gretchen.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
All right. We are super excited to have Gretchen. We're super excited about this research. We have some press coming up on it that may actually, should actually have already dropped by the time you listen to this. So Gretchen is here to help us unpack a Latino worldview study that's chock full of rich information about one of the most dynamic voting demographics in the country today. Before we launch into that, Gretchen, why don't you give our listeners just a quick insights into how you design your research and how it differs from more traditional instruments such as polls and focus groups?
Thanks, Kerry. Well, yeah, I am all about really understanding people from the perspective that they bring to the world and how they see the world through their eyes. When I first got into research, I really appreciated, of course, traditional methodologies, focus groups and polls. Those are important, don't get me wrong. But what I wanted to know was, what were people unable to articulate in a group or even on their own or through numbers? What were the stories? What was the movie that they were living in? What's the soundtrack of their lives? And, how do they experience things in 3D or 4D or whatever the heck, So we use a technique called metaphor elicitation. It's based in a Harvard-founded technique many years ago, based in neuroscience and psychology. And we use all kinds of different multimedia and videos from people's lives to really uncover the experience that people are having in America.
All right, there we go. So I will say, when I first started working here, one of the things that Jenifer asked me to do was to look at a youth ethnography that you had done in the 2024 cycle. And I was basically just, running through it and looking for copy edits and things like that. And I came away thinking, that's probably the richest material I've ever seen on young people since I've been reading up about politics. So it was really, really enlightening. And this Latino worldview study is as well. So
yeah,
why
can
don't
I just add one thing to that, Kerry? Because it's just to help people understand why we use this kind of research at Way to Win, because it's, part of our whole theory around listening to voters deeply and kind of understanding where they are more under the surface, like Gretchen was saying. And that's just part of how we do our deep listening, which is part of then what we use to figure out how to persuade people on the issues that matter. So this format that Gretchen uses is something that we have been using as part of our whole Way to Win research sort of strategy over the past several years, which I'm sure we'll talk about the last Latino study that we did with Gretchen a few years ago too.
Okay. All right. So why don't we just kick it off? And Gretchen, if you could highlight several of what you think of as the most significant findings, to your mind from this study in 2026. And, obviously, Jen, if you want to jump in with some political insights, happy to have that happen too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was so grateful to be able to, interview this dynamic group of people. We talked to 122 people in the southern region of America, across multiple states. Obviously, Latinos are not a monolith, as everybody knows, and we wanted to understand, how things had changed over time, and if there was an opportunity space to meet people where they were at, to persuade them, to mobilize them. And was their experience different in this moment in time with the Trump administration? I guess a couple of years in, what was life through their eyes? And we found some really distinct findings. Obviously, the story of values and Latino values is something that crops up, I think, with any study, right? You really want to understand, where people's hearts are at, where their heads are at. And that certainly came through loud and clear, right? Just as we had seen before. And in so many other studies, the story of Latinos and hard work and endurance and the American dream, all of those things, freedom, right? Those popped. But the thing that was different about this study was that for the first time that I have seen in field work, we heard Latinos saying, hey, I still hold these values. These values are really important to me, but I'm seeing that they're not paying off. They are not paying off. I'm still going to believe in hard work, but gosh darn it, I'm paying into the system and I deserve something back. And this government is not giving it back to me. And I need something to change. That was a huge thing that we saw again and again and again in the population that we spoke with. And it was really powerful. The second thing that we saw was the notion of time, which we are chewing on a whole lot. We asked a variety of different ways, right? How do you experience time? How do you experience money? What is life like? And the story that we got back was, yeah, life is really expensive right now. But even with all the money in the world, the thing that I can't make more of, the thing that I can't replace is time. And with this government and in this moment in America, I am working 52 hours a week. I'm not spending any time with my family, and it is all I want to do. If I had all the money in the world, that would be fine. But the thing is, you can't replace time. And in America, my life is being stolen from me. My time is being stolen. And the idea of reorganizing our messaging and our the way that we think about it, I think, around time was really powerful for us. And then the last idea was movements and mobilization. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks this way, because I'm a goober, but I think a lot, when it's civic action, like go to the streets, protest, vote, get involved in certain prescriptive kinds of ways. When we were looking at, the question of like, do these folks that we're studying, are they getting together? Are they doing any of that, right? What they were doing was, yes, they were mobilizing, but it was showing up in different ways than what is sort of the common prescriptive. They were taking jujitsu classes. They were going to church. They were having a whole lot of picnics. And what it sort of presented to us is there's a huge opportunity space, to meet people where they're at, and perhaps unconventional, apolitical, nonpartisan spaces. And then, introduce through mutual care, what have you, things that matter, because, politics are personal, but meet people where they're at in a meaningful way. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kerry.
I sure am. There was a dog barking outside, and I thought that wouldn't be great. Jen, did you want to jump in? Because I have certainly some things that I can get into to tease out some of these themes, but I wondered if there was anything you wanted to follow up with specifically.
Sure. Yeah, I think I was curious to have you talk a little bit more about the kind of the difference. You were saying that you feel like this time you're in this study, you're hearing from the Latino voters that we talked to that they feel like they understand that the system is broken in a real way, and that in the past you've seen them sort of like believe that the American dream could happen, and like somehow that the sort of the problem in the economy and sort of like why they're not getting ahead has become more clear. Is that right?
No, that's absolutely right, Jen. It has become come into sharp relief for these guys. They are yes, in previous studies, we were looking at like, well, yes, the economy's not where I don't have it quite right. I'm not quite successful yet, but if I just work harder, if I open up a business, or if I get the deal that the corporations have for me, and then I open up my own business and I do all of this XYZ, right? Like A through Z, I'll do all those things, and I'll do more things, and I'll do them more, then I'll be okay.
Yeah.
But right now, yeah.
Got you. And like, how was it coming across in some of the imagery that the respondents gave in terms, like, what made you feel that and what you saw?
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, some of it was just explicit, right? People were saying like, this isn't working. I'm trying everything. I'm doing everything right. And I'm still not getting ahead. I'm running on this treadmill. I can't keep up. I don't see myself getting up. One of our participants really kind of floored me when he talked about, it's not the American dream, it's the Mexican dream. He had friends moving back to Mexico because this isn't working. That hit me. The other thing that hit me too was, hearing about the economy. During Biden's administration, right, we heard a lot about the economy doing really, really well. And obviously, objectively, right, it was doing well. I mean, I'm not an expert on the economy, but, you look at the numbers, like check. But the experience of that these folks were living, and the experience, I think, of many Americans was, the idea of two economies, the one that they hear about and the one that they live in, right? The economy versus my economy. And the experience of that, and the experience of not only not being able to afford things or not be able to spend time with family, not being able to do things despite doing quote unquote everything right. And then seeing like, hey, everything's great with the economy. I don't know what you're talking about. That huge gap really pounded home for our participants that there was a disconnect. And that something was wrong. And that feels like a really big opportunity space.
Yeah. When I was looking back at the 2023 information, one of the things I noted was that, there's this real collapse of trust in the government and in the system itself, right? So in 2023, 51% of people said they were somewhat or completely in control of their future. That was how they felt, right? And only 22% said they had little or no control. But if you move up to where they're talking about the system and the government, 87% in terms of the system said it needed major changes or needed to be torn apart entirely. And then in terms of the government, there was also like 96% selected a negative term to describe the US government, with corrupt and disappointed topping the list. So it's just a massive turnaround in terms of their trust in institutions and in the government.
It's huge. And I think, and I'd love to hear Jen's perspective on this, but, I think it's a really interesting moment to interrogate as Democrats because, we traditionally, right, Democrats have been the party of government. And yet here we are, we have a federal administration that is pretty much entirely run by Republicans, and their government and the experience people are having of that government is not a positive one. And that's across the board. We've seen it in this study for sure. We've seen it even more broadly across other studies. When we ask people to bring in, images representing the government and what it is to them, people are bringing in pictures of boots crushing people. I mean, how crazy is that? A government that is antagonistic to the very people it serves. And so how do we thread that needle and say, like, government is good? Because right now it's not good. It is not good. But it does feel like a huge opportunity space, because all of these perceptions are being blitzed out. So, Jen, what do we do about that?
Yeah. No pressure, Jen, but how do we gain the trust back?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's going to be probably a long road, but I do think we have to separate out the current regime and the current actors in the government and the Trump administration and what they're doing, the Republican brand. Like, I do think we have work to do to separate that from just the idea of government. And it does seem like we've seen some traction, like around some of this corruption messaging that we've been seeing working really well, of like just really calling out the specific, Republican Party and Trump administration for how corrupt they are. Yet I still think we've seen that people believe that government should kind of help us solve big problems. That's been something we've seen consistently. They may not feel that right now, of course, they're not, but there's still some hope that, I guess, that we could build toward that more, and that we could that we can kind of prime that idea more in people, and that you can see with even things like Mamdani and what he's doing at a local level. It's like the actions that matter. It's like people being able to see things tangibly, like all the potholes are getting filled with Mamdani in charge of New York City. And then people are like, oh, government can work. And you can start to like feed that different narrative.
Yeah, well said. I think if I may too, one of the things that we've heard, that's sort of a riff off of the time thing, but like the idea of speed equaling effectiveness, and the notion that we need to deliver things quickly. And I think, we've seen that with Mamdani, right? Like, I'm going to do this, and then here it is, and voila, and the visibility. And it does feel like an antidote to a lot of the corruption irritation that people have, right? You can see what I'm doing it right now. And that question of efficacy, I said I'd get it to you, and here it is 2 days later. I don't know. My patience has gotten so. I order something on Amazon and I get it in 2 days or 3 days. I probably shouldn't order on Amazon, but here we are. But there's you want things quicker than.
Another sort of interesting piece of this too is just their partisan perceptions. It seems like in 2023 they did have still some remaining sort of trust that Democrats, even if they weren't delivering, had their best interests at heart, right? But in the 2026 version, and I shouldn't say version, but the 2026 research, right? That this idea comes across that they still have political values, but they have no political home, and they didn't really believe that that across the board that any particular partisan, any political party had their best interests at heart, were really invested in them. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Gretchen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of it is, I think in many ways we're still thinking through how to see people and how to meet people where they're at. I think the idea of the movement thing, right? And like not seeing people in traditional civic spaces is just one example of things where we're sort of like, this is where you show up if you're a Democrat. You show up on the protest, you show up in the thing, you show up in the voting booth, right? And then they're not doing that. But the thing is, they're showing up in a different way, and there's an opportunity to meet them there, right? Republicans aren't meeting them there, nor are Democrats, and that's really, it feels like a real big sweet spot. Same thing with values, and we interrogated this a little bit in the study. Identity always crops up, especially when it's threatened, right? Like if you're attacked as a woman, like it's like, well, I'll be the biggest woman ever, like I'll do that, and we sort of saw that, right, with all of the actions the administration has been taking with ICE and all of that's a big threat profile that is elevating Latino identity at the top. But the preference is, look, I want you to see, just as with everybody, right? I want you to see me as a whole person. Yes, I'm Latino. I am also a hard worker. I'm also a mom. I'm also a daughter. I'm also a blah, 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 blah. These are the things that I do, just as anyone would want to be seen, right? Not just by one identity group tag. So, Jen, do you want to add anything?
I do think, I think, Gretchen, what you're talking about, and I know that Jen is interested in this too, is some of the perceptions that you're talking about fit into sort of this worldview question that we have asked over and over again of many different demographics and in many different focus groups and polls that we've done. And I'm wondering if we can pull that up, Dan, the worldview question, so that Gretchen can talk a little bit about this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, when we were polling people within the context of the study, right, the vast majority of folks talked about where the problems in the country come from, And they talked about it. It's talking about, the richest 1%. They saw how working class Americans have been deprioritized, how, tax cuts have robbed them blind and privatized healthcare, that basically life has not been set up for them. And when they were asked, again, where the problems were, they pointed up. They didn't point to a lack of bipartisanship. They didn't point to out of control government spending or DEI or rights for transgender people. They knew where the system was rigging against them, and it was a really big finding.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like what we call this kind of status threat messaging that the Republicans have been really leaning into, and definitely it permeates through a lot of the messaging that they sort of direct at Latino voters. And so it is kind of interesting. Like, I think why we like this particular question is we don't usually give people this choice, right? And so I think when they hear all of the messaging from the Republicans about, the reason why things are hard is because of immigrants, it's because of trans people, etc. Like when you can put that up against what, our analysis is what the actual problem is the billionaires, the 1% taking all of the money from the working class of America. Like even Latinos who are so heavily like pummeled with that right-wing narrative are sort of seeing through it. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
And a good lesson for Democrats, because it just shows like where there is power in pointing people into the right direction of why things are hard. And was a real failure of 2024.
Mm.
And just for people who are listening and not watching, because we are sort of cycling through some of the deck here for people who watch this on YouTube. But when asked what the source of the country's problems were, 56% chose having an economic system where the richest 1% have taken trillions in dollars of wealth from working class Americans over the course of decades. 29% said a lack of bipartisanship, and just 15%, because this is the Republican sort of trope that they roll out, which is it's due to out of control government spending, too many immigrants coming here, and people being too woke, DEI, rights for trans folks, that type of thing. So the Republican part of that really falls flat with these folks.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got a collapse in trust in the system, a collapse in trust in the government. We've got people wanting more time, feeling like their time has been stolen from them. And we've got opportunities here. And I wonder, Gretchen, if, one of the opportunities you've talked about is meeting Latinos in the places where they are. Do you see other opportunities that are being missed right now where Democrats could find ways to engage, message, etc.? And really, that's a Jen question too, to be honest. So,
yeah. Well, I think two things. First, I think honoring the values that these guys hold. Sorry, that's the New Yorker me coming out. These guys hold and saying, look, you do hold these. This was the deal that you made. You do believe in hard work. You have worked hard. You've done all of this. You've checked those boxes, and it should pay you back. This is how government ought to be. It should be accountable to you. It should be helping you so that you can spend time with your family. It should do this. I think threading that needle of, yes, you have those values. You're good, or you're right to hold those values, and you're also right to expect, a payout on those values. That is not wrong. I think that's a huge opportunity space for Democrats. I also think, and I see that you brought up my favorite picture ever, the picnic picture. Thank you, Kerry.
That's Dan. I have to say that's Dan's work. So he's running the tech. Yeah.
And so I think speaking to people from the frame of time is actually quite powerful here. For years we have done work together, and I'm so grateful to Way to Win for the opportunity to be in partnership with them over the years. You guys are amazing. And we've done this work really to understand what the hopes and dreams of voters are, really, really, really. And we ask people always to bring in images of their future, what they want, what they really want, right? And I'm not gonna lie, of course we get pictures of like money, that'd be fun, or like a vacation. But the picture by and large that people bring in, and it showed up in this study as well, again and again and again, is the picnic, representing the ideal future. This is how everything in America should be. This is what it ought to be. And what it represents is not ants in potato salad or cups that blow away in the wind. It represents community. It represents being together in a multiracial way, because people will always bring in images. It's not just like one race, multi-generational, being able to enjoy each other. I think in this world right now, right, we're spending a lot of time on our phones. We're spending a lot of time working. We're spending a lot of time, or having a lot of our time stolen from us, and not having the choice of being able to enjoy life. And this is what that represents. It's about being able to enjoy life and having time with those you love most. And I think the time idea, honoring that, people don't feel like they are in control of their time, and the deep shame around that, and also finding ways to give people their time back, or saying that the things we're doing is going to do that, I think is a huge opportunity space, not just because it's true and it's emotional and it crosses partisan lines, because we didn't just study, folks who were on Team Blue. We studied Team Red. This was, we studied folks across the board, but also because it is adjacent to the economy. People think about time and money in like two little ways, like two little twins. They hang together. But time is something that has been unclaimed by partisan identity at this point. And I think that that's a huge opportunity space for Democrats, to meet people where they're at in a very deeply emotional way. I'd be curious to hear what you think, Jen.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the thing about kind of money fading into the background is really interesting, because you're right that a lot of the kind of messaging, or even like the imagery that you see in the ads, some of the Republican and the right-wing ads, it's always about like the big house and like the things, like the things that you can buy with money. And so I feel like the idea of kind of money fading into the background, because it does feel like that's the story that was resonating throughout 2020 and through 2024 from Trump toward this community, was like be with us because we're going to make you more rich. Like, you're going to be rich like us. You're going to have the big house and the big truck and like all the things. So I think being able to have a different angle that's like, remember, like, what you want in life is time to be with your family. What you want is, to not have to worry so much about money. It's kind of the same. It's like a similar aspirational idea, but which is good for this community, of course, because they're very aspirational just generally. Mm-hmm. But it's not about, it's not about like things and capitalism and money. And so it's just a different angle on it, and definitely more about community and more about family. I think that this idea is really powerful, and I do feel like it came across in this study in a bigger way than we've seen in other previously. And then we've also been seeing it kind of like in the corporate space. We saw like a recent ad campaign. I forget which corporation it was, but it was some big corporation. And it was like all about, people wanting their time. And so that made us feel like, oh, this probably is a really good market research insight.
I think it was an internet company ad that was saying that, you can have, you're going to have the same price in 5 years. I can't remember which internet but you're going to have the same price for 5 years from now for your internet service. And then they did a whole meditation on what happens in a 5-year span of a, growing child and a mother. It was really touching, actually, but it's one of those tricky ads where you're like, oh, right, this is for this is like from T-Mobile or something. I can't remember which one.
Right.
Yeah. But it's like a different way of talking to people, right? And it's kind of a different I guess like it's like a different angle and it does feel like it's an angle that is more conducive to democratic policies and kind of our economic vision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It allows people to actually spend time with their families and like live their lives, which is something that I think all of those policies are about. And can I add too?
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about freedom. I think we made a big push, all of us, right? Reclaiming freedom, because that became sort of a Republican value. The flags,
Yeah.
we'll get to that next year, I don't know. But the family idea, right? That is not exclusive to Republicans. In fact, a lot of
Right.
the values that Democrats are about, right? Getting time with families, being able to have a family, being able to afford a family, being able to like choose when you have a family. All those ideas are baked into this idea of time. So it does feel like also an opportunity to reclaim some ideas that maybe have been unintentionally seeded along the way.
Yeah, I think what both of you are getting at is how emotionally resonant this idea is across the board. It speaks across the board. And since you're both researchers and you're both looking at, different polls and different research all the time, I do wonder if you're getting a whiff of this anywhere else, because it does make me wonder if, because we were so, focused and did such deep and rich research into a certain demographic, if we managed to pick up on something that also might prove resonant elsewhere. And I don't know if we have an answer to that yet, but it's certainly a question that hangs in my mind.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about the like the ads that we've done recently, the digital ads that we have going up in some congressional districts. We talked about that last week or a couple of weeks ago.
A few weeks ago, we showed some of those ads. And one of them is very time specific.
Yeah. So I think that was a different data point because we tested that with all voters, right, across the board in these states and nationally. So that ad did kind of use this idea of these are the things we want in life. Trump's economy is robbing us from the ability to have them, and we want our time back. So I think that's another proof point that the message was resonant, not just in the Latino community, but across the board with voters.
Yeah,
agreed. I don't know, Gretchen, if you've seen it in other work you're doing.
Yeah. I think, we've done some work on leadership and the question of what Americans are looking for in leaders. And, one of the things that we have been seeing is the question of the people want speed in their leadership, which I thought was weird when I first saw it. But then in the context of time, it sort of makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you feel like your life is being stolen from you, like, chop, let's go. And I think that really just speaks to what Democrats can do in this moment. But I think it's something worth attending to, and it's something I think that electeds, candidate, everybody, anyone who represents Democrats and can certainly speak to and work to solve for in American life, because it's clearly an acute need that a lot of people are feeling.
One other thing that I wanted to sort of get back to and shine a light on was political involvement. And, you've talked about how there are these spaces that are sort of rich target opportunities. But it is kind of interesting to note, there's a slide in here, and Dan's got it up, where 59% of people say, I care about politics and follow it, but I see myself more as an observer or a commenter rather than a participant or a builder. So it does seem like not only is there an opportunity to meet them where they are, but potentially to bring them, to get them more active. I certainly don't know how to do it, but I wonder if you could reflect on that a little bit from the scope of the research, Gretchen.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I think there was a research stat that was going around a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to remember where it came from, but it was something like people spend an average of like 4 minutes a week attending to politics. Something shocking. Do you remember that? I don't know who those people are.
That's crazy. Yes.
That's right. But of course that also depends on how you define politics, right? And the impact of politics. And I think that that sort of really is the opportunity space of defining what is political and finding ways to take the, you know, political understanding and meeting people where they're at. You know, one of the things that we see is obviously people care a great deal about their communities and their families, but they don't always connect the dots to like, and this is why, you know, and, you know, in the conversations that we've been having, sort of unpacking the study, you know, we've been talking about things like mutual aid or, you know, different political things that have been done, but in a frame of, hey, let's have some pasta together and talk about what's happening in our community. Hey, let me help you with this medical situation and we'll find ways to solve for it together. Hey, let me feed this community or what have you. It seems like there's a real appetite for making, you know, enjoining the personal and the political, but in a way that usually involves pasta, and then involves more like real life stuff. Not that traditional civic action doesn't include that, but finding ways to really truly meet people where they're at. Jen, do you want to offer your thoughts on this? Because we always have good ones.
No, and I don't actually have too much to add based on what you already said. I feel like it's like the real challenge is ultimately kind of like, I think that there's potential in this community for people to see themselves as a builder of things. I think it makes sense that they wouldn't see themselves that way in politics, just because of how politics is and how sort of we've seen such disparities in, you know, even the amount of resources that go into the civic engagement of this community from the side of our side, right? Like Republicans have actually put a lot more into kind of building like civic life in the Latino community. And so I guess it just, to me, yeah, it is like a sort of microcosm of a larger problem that we have with people feeling like observers, because we saw this in the Skipper research too, that we did when, you know, after the 2024 election. We saw it among younger people too, like across all demographics, around just feeling like they're a bystander to democracy and that they're not actually part of building and growing it. So I feel like it's like these numbers are sort of dire in this particular community, but it's kind of a problem everywhere. So
yeah,
I gotta go back to the local community thing, you know.
It's interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Gretchen. Sorry.
That's everything. You know, I love Move On, and I think that people are amazing who made it. But I actually heard about a study, excuse me, a couple days ago that tracked the rise of Move On, and sort of a national organization that just had the emails of people with a lot of collapse of like local clubs, local civic action related clubs, and like it just, and I think that and all, by the way, I know people Move On, so I love you all, but I think that there is something there to contemplate, and the importance of building local community infrastructure, maintaining that, movement groups, finding ways to continue to like seed the nation across the board, not just in the swings, right? But beyond that, is Way to Win is so beautifully doing. There's got to be a way to sort of invest in those communities, and then also, you know, honor the different kinds of experiences. We've talked about that. There's different ways that people want to engage civically, and expanding the menu of engagement, you know, is really, really critical.
Yeah. I mean, if you redefine political participation as building community, as, you know, eating together, as, you know, showing up to picnics together, as things like that, if you then, you know, I mean, Republicans have used cultural touch points, I think, to sort of like try to build that community. But if Democrats started to focus more on connection, then that seems like a fruitful focus as a source of starting to get people to redefine what's important, not only to them, but in terms of their civic and political participation. So anyway.
Yes, the connection, and then rebuilding agency, reminding people that they can do things together. That is a source of deep pride and importance in people, especially now who are exhausted and they're being crushed by the government. They need to remember that they can do things, and they need to, and that building the community is going to be essential for elections, but also just for the health of the nation.
At risk of, I'm going to take a risk here because this may not be usually we try to end on a high note or a takeaway note, but I do want to just, this community has, Latinos in particular, people of color have really suffered under this administration. Mm-hmm. And we constantly talk about how in our focus groups, people talk about fighters, not folders. And I'm wondering if Dan can cue up, there was one woman who we had a video of her talking to camera. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about what kind of desperate times they are, that we are living in. And can you, Dan, is it possible for you to cue that up and we can listen to it? And then
it's really hard for me to put my thoughts into words without getting emotional, but all I would ask is that people be treated as humans, just as we are. People are waking up every single day in fear. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to work. It is a terrible time to be living in America. And it's really scary. It's really freaking scary. Yeah, it's really hard not to get emotional about this because it's so real. And I'm starting to see it in Arizona. I'm starting to see people that I know and I love being affected by this. And it's extremely heartbreaking. So I'd ask the politicians, do something about this, use their power for good. Humans do not deserve to be treated this way. It is extremely inhumane, and something needs to be done.
Yeah. Heartbreaking. And mobilizing.
Heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see in that so many of the themes that would have cropped up that we just talked about, which is, having a lack of trust in government, wanting people who will fight for you, feeling perhaps politically disengaged or disempowered by what's happening, and just wanting someone to stand up. So that was kind of the reason that I wanted to bring that in, is to let someone from this group that we studied, sort of speak for themselves before we ended.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you did. Yeah, this is what we're fighting for. These are people, right? And it's real. It's not a game. And I think that just, I don't know, makes me want to work harder. And
Yeah, I know it's motivating, and it kind of makes you wish you could play that for every single person who's running for office right now, to help them really understand where people are. It's hard. Yeah.
Okay, well, I knew that was a risk, but it felt like a risk worth taking. It gives you the feels and it gets you. But this is where we are in this country right now. So let's leave it there for now. Thank you, Gretchen Barton. I don't know why I can't speak today. And Jen for joining us today to discuss these very important findings. Gretchen, where can people find you online?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kerry. They can find me www.worthystrategygroup.com. Would love to meet anybody. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Gretchen.
Thank you. Thanks.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey to build a better American future. If you're still a lurker, go subscribe. You don't want to miss a beat on the groundbreaking research you're getting right here at Charting the Way Forward. And as you see time play a bigger role in the next couple of cycles, I think you will. I think that will happen. Remember that you heard it here first on Charting the Way Forward. And with that, until next week, do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and tell your dog I say hi.